POV. You just took over the cartel. Now everyone wants you dead. The throne was never offered to you. It was left. There is a specific difference between those two things that you understand completely, because you are 41 years old and you have been inside this organization since before it was this organization, and you know the specific weight of authority that is claimed versus authority that is inherited versus authority that simply exists because the previous holder of it no longer exists, and the vacuum produced by the absence pulls everything nearby into it with the specific gravity of things that cannot remain empty. You are LO3. You belong not only to the inner circle, but are also the stepson of the leader and the son of Rosalinda Gonzalez Valencia, long considered the financial administrator of the clan. Inside crime, you are the closest thing to a blood heir that the organization has available. El Minchito is in a federal penitentiary in the United States, serving life plus 30. Your uncle Antonio is in American federal custody in Washington, D.C. Your uncle Abraham was arrested in Mexico in February 2025 and remains in Mexican custody. The family that built this organization is distributed across the detention infrastructure of two governments, and you are the one still standing and still free and still inside the Jalisco Mountains on the morning of February 23rd, when the first full assessment of what Sunday produced lands on your operational picture. With no apparent heir or succession plan, the CJNG is highly likely to fragment violently in spectacular fashion. Unlike the Sinaloa Cartel, a two-family organization that fractured along familial lines, El Mencho led an organization with a far larger number of high-ranking figures who lack blood ties. Al Jazeera, the analysts writing this from Washington, are not wrong. They are also not inside the room you are inside on Monday morning with 14 commanders, who each control a piece of what El Mencho built, and who each arrived at this room with their own calculation about what the calculation produces for them personally. You read every face in the room before you say anything. El Jardinero is in the third chair from the left. Audius Flores Silva controls Michoacan and parts of Guerrero, with highly capable geographically separated factions. Al Jazeera. He arrived early. Men who arrive early to rooms like this are performing something, and the performance tells you what the performance is designed to conceal. El Jardinero arrived early to establish his physical presence in the room before you established yours. He is the most capable operational commander in the organization and the least reliable subordinate, and the combination has been the most significant internal management problem of the past 3 years, and it is now the most significant succession problem of the next 3 months. El Dobelar is in the 6th chair. Ricardo Ruiz Velasco controls the Guadalajara corridor, the historic base and logistical heart of the cartel. Al Jazeera, he arrived on time. Men who arrive on time have already decided something. El Dobelar has decided you are preferable to the alternative, which is El Jardinero. Not because El Dobelar's loyalty to you is structural, but because El Dobelar's self-interest is structural, and his self-interest calculates that your authority is more predictable than El Jardinero's. And predictability is the thing that the Guadalajara corridor's logistics. Operations require above all other things. You understand you are the preference of the men who want stability over the man who represents chaos. This is not the same as loyalty. You will not confuse it for loyalty. You speak for 11 minutes. Not about succession. About business. About the routes that are running and the routes that need immediate attention, and the specific operational priorities of a 48-hour window in which the Mexican military is repositioning and the DEA and CIA task force that produced the Sunday operation is running. Post-operational assessment and the Sinaloa cartel's operational commanders are waking up on a Monday morning in a landscape that has just changed in ways that produce the specific opportunistic calculation that every Sinaloa faction manager is currently running. 4 CJNG commanders may be vying for supremacy and may enter a succession war to define control of the cartel, though a negotiated transition is also possible. HST today, you are making the negotiated transition the only available option by filling the operational space with decisions before the succession war has time to organize itself. This is the specific strategy of a man who understands that the succession question is won or lost in the first 72 hours, not because military force in the first 72 hours produces the outcome, but because the operational decisions made in the first 72 Hours establish the decision-making precedent that the subsequent weeks run on. You make decisions, the decisions get executed. The execution is the announcement. By the time El Jardinero has organized his challenge, the announcement will have been made in every corridor and every plaza and every cell that the announcement needs to reach. The retaliatory wave is already running and has been running since Sunday night. 25 members of Mexico's National Guard are among those who died in clashes in Jalisco state in the first days alone. Northeastern Global News. You did not order this specifically. You ordered the stand down by Tuesday morning because the sustained escalation crosses into the territory that produces American military pressure on the Mexican government, that produces the specific operational conditions in which the hunt for the new leadership intensifies, before the new leadership is consolidated. The cartel remains business first. They aren't driven by politics. They're driven by business. Vision of humanity, the business is the argument you make in the rue. 11 minutes of business. The routes. The Chinese precursor chemical supply chain, whose primary coordinator was killed in Tapalpa. The synthesis operations running at 80% of capacity because the logistics disruption of the past 48 hours has affected supply chain coordination. The Sinaloa repositioning along 3 corridors that requires immediate response, not through military escalation, which invites the American intervention that the organization cannot currently absorb, but through the specific territorial management of organizations that understand that business is the argument. You end the 11 minutes. You tell them the meeting resumes in 6 hours. You tell each of them individually through eye contact what the 6 hours are for, which is for each of them to calculate that the alternative to this room working is the specific chaos that produces the outcome that serves none of them. El Jardinero holds the eye contact for approximately 2 seconds longer than the others. 2 seconds is a communication. You receive it. The threats arrive through 3 channels in the first 48 hours. The first is internal, not a direct threat. Direct threats in this architecture are not the instrument, because direct threats leave traces, and traces are the instrument of the investigation that follows the power transition. What arrives is information. 2 of El Jardinero's sub-commanders have been in contact with each other about a meeting that El Jardinero has not informed you of. The meeting is the threat. The meeting's existence communicated through your intelligence channel is El Jardinero telling you he knows you know, and the knowing is itself the opening move. You respond not to the meeting but to El Jardinero's Michoacan operation. You move 2 financial approvals through the system that benefit his corridor's logistics infrastructure. The approvals are real approvals for real operational needs. They are also a communication. I am governing, not competing. The governing includes your corridor. The message is sent in the language of resource allocation rather than the language of threat, and the language of resource allocation is the language of contest. El Jardinero receives the approvals. The meeting with his sub-commanders does not produce action in the first week. The first week is the window you need. The second threat is external. Security forces are fully occupied with restoring order after CJNG members set up hundreds of roadblocks across several states. HST today, the military repositioning produces a surveillance density in Jalisco that is the highest it has been since 2015. Helicopters. Drone coverage from American assets whose position you know because you have been watching their position for 3 years through the same intelligence infrastructure El Mencho maintained for his own security. The intelligence tells you that the post-operational assessment is focusing on the succession question, that they are watching the 14 commanders for the communication patterns that indicate consolidation, that the specific communication architecture you are using to establish authority is being analyzed by people whose professional purpose is to identify it. You communicate less. This is counterintuitive. Establishing authority requires communication, and reducing communication reduces authority. But the surveillance window is the specific period in which communication creates the documentary record that produces the next operation, and the next operation is aimed at you, and you are not going to be in a property in Tapalpa when the next operation runs. You move every 36 hours, not on a schedule. Schedules are the vulnerability that